How much time each day do you spend doing versus thinking? Today, we're here to talk about experiences and answer the question about how to make good decisions, whether personal or at work, how to improve personal relationships, and how to manage our emotions on those days when nothing seems to be going our way. I'm Pamela D. Wilson. The answer to this is finding wisdom in our daily experiences. Every day we wake up with this intention of doing our best, but how many of us wake up thinking, what will I learn today? I want to share 4 ideas for you to think about by sharing experiences that a lot of us have in common, whether you work in healthcare, sales, finance, law, real estate, manufacturing, the service industry, any field. Number one is that wisdom comes from being considerate, empathetic, and compassionate with ourselves and other people. But it's interesting because our interactions are perceived differently than we think many times. And our perception or the perception of another person is not always reality. It's not always what's going on. And I want to add some context for the experiences that I'm going to share. I'm Pamela D. Wilson, and for most of my professional life, 20 plus years, I have been a care manager for family caregivers, older adults, and the disabled. And I've also served as a professional fiduciary, which means a court appointed guardian, a medical financial power of attorney, trustee, personal rep of the estate to help people through healthcare issues. And so compassion, empathy, consideration are very important in managing our interactions with other people. And when I managed care for people with developmental disabilities or older adults with Alzheimer's disease. And so a couple of examples about perception. I managed care for adults who may have been 50 years old, but because of their disability, they may have had a mindset or ability of a 6-year-old. And so, as you can imagine, the challenge might be looking at someone who is 50 years old, who appears 50 years old, but having to take a step back and say, okay, I have to look at the situation differently and act differently because while I am seeing this 50-year-old, I'm talking to a 6-year-old. There were also clients that I had who were autistic, who had amazing intelligence levels and very poor social skills, who would insult me or yell or scream. And I too then had to take a step back and manage how I responded. In other situations, some of these adults had photographic memories. They could verbalize conversations that they heard on the news or that a company president or a scientist could have and have a conversation with you, but have no idea what they were saying. So, in those situations, the compassion and the empathy came from saying, wow, I hear you saying this word. Do you even know what that means? So, it was a lot of going back to check understanding. And in these situations, I was the one who had to adjust because my clients could not. So let's relate this to a situation of family caregivers for people with Alzheimer's or dementia or some kind of brain injury. These children look at their parents like they were a corporate executive or an airplane pilot or professionals of all walks of life or the mother who ran the household like that. And today, this person that they're looking at who managed everything is struggling to perform simple activities of life or they can't remember anything. So I would have, and I still do have, adult children saying, oh, my parents, they're frustrating me. They're purposely forgetting information. They don't remember what I told them. And I say, well, but they can't. You're visually seeing your parent, but up here, they lack the mental capacity to do everything that they used to do. So they're not purposely trying to irritate you. This is the reality today, and it's you that has to adjust to be kind, considerate, and empathetic. So, in all areas of our life, whether it's somebody who cuts you off in traffic or somebody at work who gives you a funny look today, and you're thinking, what's wrong with them? It comes back to us and how we respond and our ability to become kind and compassionate and empathetic. And we can lack these qualities when we only consider ourselves and we don't really understand the life situations of other people or what's going on. So, the wisdom in this daily life experience that we can gain is that there's a gap between what we might see in front of us and what's happening underneath or behind the scenes. And how can we be more considerate to learn about that so that we can gain the wisdom to make our relationships better with other people? Number two, for finding wisdom in our daily experiences, regulating our emotions by realizing that what we think the problem is, or that situation to be, is not always the problem. And I'm going to give a couple examples. How many of us have something happen and we immediately react? We're like, oh my gosh, it's a tragedy, it's a nightmare, it's horrible. Or how quickly do we jump to considerations about something that we hear or see without getting the facts or thinking through a situation? One of the things I learned when I was a care manager and a professional fiduciary, and that I trained my staff in a lot, was to stop and think, reflect, and then react. Even if you had to say, I need a moment to think about that, or give me a day and I'll get back to you. Sometimes I had to sleep on situations before I could make a really good decision. But realizing that up here is the knowledge that you need to gain the wisdom to manage through days where everything goes wrong and your boss is yelling at you and your parents aren't happy and your spouse is saying, why did you forget to pick up X at the store last night? It's also about learning how to manage what I call emotional triggers. So, emotional triggers could be things like waiting in line and getting impatient, or you're at work and somebody goes, and all of a sudden you're thinking, oh my God, what's wrong? What are they thinking? Or your phone rings and you look at your caller ID and it's this person and you're thinking, oh, I really don't want to take this phone call. So, the experience and the knowledge that we can gain is that it's possible to learn how to manage through our emotions when we realize that we really do have control over our emotions and how we look at situations and how we manage our time too. So, I want to share a story about patience and waiting in a line to illustrate perceptions when you may not know exactly what's going on. So, a couple months ago, I'm driving to the office and I hear this click, 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 click in my tire. And I'm thinking, oh gosh, I got a flat, something's wrong. So I drive to the tire store, and no surprise, there's a nail in there that they take out. Well, half my morning's gone, and it's almost 11 o'clock. And I think, I forgot my lunch. I got to go get something to eat. So I go into a Subway. And I get there, and there's two people in line in front of me. And then all of a sudden, there's like 10 people out the door. And it's taking a really long time. And on this day, I didn't think to bring a book in with me or anything to read, which is what I usually do when I know I have to wait so that I'm not impatient. But so I'm watching what's going on in front of me and I'm thinking, why is this taking so long? What's going on? There's a young man up there, maybe late 20s, maybe 30s. And he and the clerk are going back and forth, and I see he's shuffling through his wallet. He's giving the clerk a card, and she's saying, that one doesn't work. And he gives her another one. It's like, that one doesn't work either. And so I'm just watching, and he's well dressed, but he has a backpack on, and underneath his backpack there is a sleeping bag. And so I'm thinking, okay, what's going on in his life situation? And so I noticed that he started to walk away, and he was coming toward me, and I said, hey, how much is it? How much is your sandwich? And he said, oh, it's $10. And I said, come on, I'm going to pay for it. So he and I walked back up to the clerk, and I said, I want to pay for his sandwich. And the clerk almost has this sense of relief on her face because she probably felt bad holding up this line of now 15 or 20 people because this person couldn't pay. And, this probably happens a lot if you're in a Subway or a shop like that. So I paid, and he took his food and he walked away, and I got back in line. The next person came up, and I finally got my sandwich, and the person behind the counter making the sandwiches actually said something like, "Thank God there are kind people in this world," probably hoping to inform the 10 or 12 people now standing behind me that there was an issue and it got worked out, and we're doing the best that we can, but all these people behind me are impatient because they don't know what's going on. So I get my sandwich and I walk out, and this young man is standing by the door, and he looks at me and he says, "Thank you so much." And he's got tears in his eyes. And I say, "Well, you're welcome. Everybody has a hard day now and then. Everybody needs a little bit of help." And I went on, and I didn't really need to think about him anymore, to wonder whether he was homeless or whether he was having trouble at home with a wife or his parents or money problems or job problems or whatever. That act of what I did that day was more for me. It was my opportunity, because I had something troublesome happen, this tire in my car and having to stop at the car place and waste time. It was my ability to turn around that bad part of my day to do something good for someone else, but also to be appreciative of the fact that I had a car and I had a tire to repair, and I could actually help somebody buy a sandwich, and I wasn't having to worry about what I was going to eat that day. So the wisdom, the compassion, the understanding that we can gain through these life experiences of these emotional triggers, or balancing our emotions of being impatient, is so important. And I'm going to share two other situations. These are personal life situations that are a bit humorous, but they deal with elderly parents and caregiving. So Labor Day of this year, my mother-in-law had a fall, and she actually had several falls. And so she ended up in the hospital in a nursing home. And my husband is searching on the internet one night for lift chairs. And I'm like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Well, my mom needs a lift chair." And I'm like, "Why?" And he's like, "Well, because she keeps falling." And I'm like, "That's not the problem. The problem is that she's weak and she doesn't walk enough, and that's why she falls. Getting a lift chair is not going to solve the problem." So, how many times in our work relationships or personal relationships do we rush in to try to fix a situation with an easy fix or something that we think makes sense, and we don't realize it causes more problems? So many times, caregivers try to be so helpful to other people, their parents, and what they don't realize is they take away the independence of a parent. They make the parents more dependent on themselves, and then the caregivers are saying, "Wow, I don't have any time in my life to do anything. My parents are taking all of my time." Well, how did that happen? Being too helpful, unintentionally being too helpful. Another situation related to my mother-in-law was the fact that she was weak and she did keep falling, and she was living in an independent living community. And I said to my husband, "She really shouldn't go back there. And we need to figure this out quickly, because the nursing home is only going to keep her for so many days." He's like, "Well, how do you know that?" And I'm like, "This is what I've been doing for the past 20 years." So imagine that, people in your family not recognizing the skills that you actually have that could be helpful. Hmm. So anyway, I took my husband to tour a variety of assisted livings, and we chose one. And he had to have the conversation with his mother. And it wasn't just about the fact of having to move. It was like, how am I going to pay for this? Who's going to clean out my apartment? Who's going to move my things? What if I have to change doctors? How am I going to get my medications? How it's all of these unknowns that scare parents, that make them seem resistant to help from children, which is a common concern that I counsel caregivers about. But it's really all the other stuff that we have to deal with. And how do you know how to do this if you've never done it? Many caregivers don't. My husband, after this event, said to me, "Well, I would have never been able to figure this out." And I said, "Most people can't." This is the part about life experiences and gaining knowledge and gaining wisdom about how to go through life, and sometimes having to consult experts or people that you don't know. Many people go get their income taxes done by CPAs or accountants because they don't know how to do that, or they talk to caregiving experts like myself. But interestingly enough, so we have moving day scheduled with this assisted living community. And all of a sudden, my husband gets this email from the executive director saying, "Oh, we've decided that we can't meet your mom's care needs." And he calls me and he's like, "Oh my God, the sky is falling. They won't take her. What are we going to do? We have the mover schedule, all this." And I said, "Hold on. This can be worked out." And he's like, "No, it can't. They're saying they won't take my mom." And I'm like, "Just hold on." So I pick up the phone and I call the executive director. And I said, "Hey, my husband got this email saying you can't take our mother-in-law. What's going on?" And so I listened and she explained, and there was a lot of confusion between members of her staff getting inaccurate information and all of that. And we were able to work it out, but only because A, I had the confidence because of my experience that I knew I could work it out. And B, I picked up the phone. How many times do we in our work life get a voice message or an email and we're immediately going to tragedy, disaster, this person hates me, it's not going to work out, when really, if we just picked up the phone and had a conversation with somebody and learned how to have that conversation, things would work out. Gaining wisdom means living through all of these hardships and snags and adversity and growing pains and practicing how to be positive in spite of everything that can put us in a negative space or in a bad mood. Number three, for finding wisdom in our daily experiences, is we see the world as divided, or us versus them. And this is really common today because of our world environment, our political environment. So, how do we work through this? It's the idea of thinking, how do we make this work? Even though I may think that those people are different than me, or I may not like them, or maybe they don't like me, how do we make this work? Many times people give up too easily, or we can become closed minded about the effort or the time that it might take to work through a problem. How many times do you hear, "Oh, I don't have the time to do it that," or "We've already tried that," or "That's not going to work"? And there's all this negativity about a situation where people have struggled because they haven't figured out a way to make it work. All of that negativity can be draining for us and it can be draining for other people. So, the way through that is to think about solutions instead of problems. Seek out the facts before you think that people don't want to help you or won't help you or don't agree with you. I've had years of care management experience working with many of you who may be joining me here today, working with doctors and hospitals and nursing homes and insurance companies. And a lot of times, family members get frustrated because they don't realize the time constraints that people on the other side have, that they work under. And and they don't, because it's never really explained to them. They just see the end result of this problem and they get frustrated. So, for example, God bless them, CNAs who work in home care, assisted living, nursing homes, hospitals, who have to bathe 10 clients a day. And none of those clients want to participate, or it's the wrong time of day, or they would rather be doing something else. Or God bless the people on the phone lines at health insurance companies, customer service reps who are told to get these customers off the line as soon as possible because there are 500 people on the phone waiting behind them. And so I want to talk for a minute about insurance denials because I spend a lot of time on the phone about this. It's a lot of times it's simple things, but if the consumers don't know the questions to ask and the people on the other end of the phone, they're being evaluated by the time they spend on the phone. Like, am I going to get this person off the phone in 1 minute, 2 minutes, or 3 minutes? Or God, is it going to take 10? So, insurance denials, addresses that don't match billing addresses, wrong diagnosis codes. The only way to solve that as the consumer is to get someone on the end of the other line to tell you what the problem is. So here's the deal: you can't be frustrated when you do that. Call when you have plenty of time so that you can be patient to solve the problem, not let them get you off the phone, and be in the right mindset. And it really relates to everything in life. When we have problems or frustrations, if we're in the right mindset, it works out a lot better. How many times have you ever had to tried to have a conversation with somebody at work or a parent, and you just kind of sprung it on them, and they're just like, I'm not ready to have this conversation, or they react badly. And it's because you really didn't have time to let them prepare or think about what you wanted to talk about, or maybe even set an agenda. and say, this is where we want to get. How do we work together to get there? So, thinking about how do I make this work, instead of thinking that other people are problems or they're different or they're not like me, isn't the way to have a nice day, have a smooth day, have a day that works out. It's it's gaining the knowledge and working through all these problems that gives us the wisdom to know how to do it better the next time, how to have a better experience the next time. Number 4, for finding wisdom in our daily experiences is having a long-term view or putting time into perspective. A lot of us are super busy and we're rushed for time, and there's never enough time in the day to do things. Sometimes it's because we overschedule ourselves, or we don't plan very well, or we think that we can get a lot more done in this short period of time than we really can. Sometimes I will have caregivers who work say, well, how do I be on at work when I have all these family distractions and everything going on, children, parents, all of that? And so I kind of use a time example. So part of it is thinking about these little blips or compressions of time that you can focus and perform, or you have to do something you don't like and you just want to get it over with. Like maybe you have to go to the dentist and get a tooth pulled. When you think about it, all of the anxiety that you build up over this event that probably only takes 30 minutes, maybe an hour of your time. I mean, you don't sleep the night before, you're worried the whole day. All you can think of is having to go to the dentist and it's going to hurt and all of this stuff. And not that it doesn't, but if you think about, okay, between 1 and 2 o'clock, I'm not going to have a really good day and it's going to be difficult at the dentist office. But you know what? By 2 o'clock, it's over. When we look through time constraints and things in our lives that are difficult, if we can look at them and say, it's just going to be for this little period of time. I'll get through it. And then, maybe I have to follow up and come back and deal with it again, but I can do this. So, right now, at this moment, I'm talking to you all here today. At this moment, you are the most important people to me in the world. And I'm happy to be here and I'm happy to have you here with me. Every day we have this opportunity to learn. And it's realizing that these failures or delays are a learning experience. Sometimes they can be a blessing in disguise. How many of you notice that sometimes it takes a lot longer to accomplish a goal than you thought? And this is the idea of having that longer term perspective and realizing that we can't have everything today. And we shouldn't have everything today. So I'm going to use my education as an example of this longer term goal. I completed my undergraduate and my graduate degree while I was working full time. So it took me longer than most people, but I did it. But while I was doing it, I'm thinking, wow, this is a lot of effort. I'm giving up a lot of my life. I'm trading a lot of my time, like many caregivers do if they're caring for an aging parent, or you're raising children, or you're doing something else. Trading a lot of time to get this little piece of paper. And what is this going to do for me? Is it worth it? Well, at the time, I was working in a company where I needed a master's degree if I wanted to advance, and advancement was a priority for me, so I did it. But the really cool thing that I didn't realize until I got into my master's program was that the classes and the learning was at this different level of thinking. It wasn't so much memorize this list of 10 things, it was really teaching me how to think about things and how to have alone time to look at the pros and the cons and the differences and think differently and look at opposite perspectives. And it really opened my eyes to this bigger world. The other benefit was that I got to meet people in CEO positions and other positions at companies who were trying to better themselves and further their education. I would have never met those people in my daily life without going to grad school. I learned a lot. So when we look at things that take time or take a lot of effort, or we're debating on, do I do this or not? It can be easy for us to be closed minded about the work or effort that it can take to achieve a goal. And we might look at somebody and say, wow, they have it so easy, not realizing that they've been doing this thing for 5, 10, or 15 years. And now, yeah, it looks easy. Why does it look easy? because they have lived through a lot of hardship and problems and problem solving and failures and successes and ups and downs and all of that. That's how we gain knowledge to have the wisdom. And I'm going to relate this to caregiving. A lot of caregivers want good care for their parents, yet they don't realize that care is not just this daily interaction of going over to mom and dad's to deliver groceries or make a meal or help them bathe. It's the healthcare system and doctors and medical appointments and hospitals and financial planning and legal things. And they don't know about all this. And so just the simple thought of taking mom or dad to a doctor appointment, not realizing that this doctor has to see 20 patients today and only has 10 or 15 minutes because that's all insurance wants to give him. And so the caregivers go with this list of 10 things and they maybe get one accomplished and they're frustrated and they're angry at the doctor or the healthcare system, not realizing the constraints on the other side. So in those situations, whatever it is, if you're bumping up against difficulty, try to think about what's going on the other side of that, or start asking questions about, I want to make this work. How do I make this work out with you? What can I do? So for those caregivers, maybe it's the fact that I have to schedule 5 doctor appointments to get these 10 things addressed. And that's going to take 10 weeks, 12 weeks, 15 weeks, whatever. It's the idea that accepting that what we want involves the participation of other people. And sometimes things that we can't control, sometimes things that we can control. So, how to find wisdom in our daily experiences means being considerate and empathetic and compassionate, even on days when we don't feel like it or we are out of energy. It's also about balancing emotions by looking at the facts and reflecting before we respond. Also, realizing that what we think may be the problem isn't the problem, and this easy solution that we think may work like that may cause us more problems. So it's not rushing into always solving things. And it's by realizing how we feel about things, why we feel a certain way, why we react to a person a certain way. Does it remind us of something from our childhood? There are so many complications in all of this. Having a long-term view of life and learning patience gives us experience to be wise. It's the ups and downs that make us better. And it's being willing to think positive things about other people when our mind wants to go to the negative, our mind wants to judge. It's maintaining a positive mindset regardless of how others want to think differently or negatively, or how it might seem the world wants to drag you down to a different level. One of the favorite pieces of wisdom that I ever got from one of my favorite bosses, he said to me, I was dealing with a situation. He said, because if you want to get down in the mud to play with other people, that's where you're going to stay. Is it more important for you to be right? Or is it more important for you to solve this problem? And he said to me, taking the high road is always the better way. Life is much easier when you take the high road, when you give people the benefit of the doubt, when you don't always go to the negative, when you don't become judgmental, and when you look at life as the fact that people are people. We all have emotions and dreams and hopes and things that we want to accomplish. And so does everybody else. How do we work together to make that happen? Thank you for joining me today for this little bit of inspiration with us coming into the new year. Have a great day today, a great week, and a fabulous coming new year. I'm Pamela D. Wilson. My website is pameladwilson.com. On there is a lot of hope, help, and support for caregivers, for aging adults, about aging, healthcare, family, relationships, and everything in between. Also, my podcast, The Caring Generation, that airs every week, my caregiving library, online caregiving courses, and a lot of other support. Thanks for watching. Please share this with other people that you know who are looking for hope, help, support, and a little inspiration. Have a fabulous day. I'll see you all again soon.